if you want any more example of that, then you look at the Howey test and you see it's the only thing subjective in all of securities law, and go and try to apply it to the Exchange Act. It works for the Securities Act because you actually have an issuer selling you a seller. If I'm on a secondary sale, there's no issuer. Who exactly is making the contract?
Exactly.
You know, what if I say in my subscription agreement this isn't assignable? Well, okay, I said it legally can't have a contract, but you know what? It's still got those characteristics of being something investable. So, you know, the law doesn't fit, and I don't think it's going to. I'm a cynic. But I do think that, you know, I'm a big fan of the ERC 1400 standard, in part because of this. It's like, okay, we can force the restriction on transactions, not just because we want to stay compliant, but because in some cases it's the right thing to do. Anyways, my rant. If anybody wants to rant back, please.
Yeah, we built some of the technology that even though it's the transfer layer, and I just kind of argued for having the transfer layer and separating the legal layer from the transfer layer. Because of that legal layer, we built some technologies into the platform, tags and restricted assets, where the assets are restricted from transfer unless they've been tagged by some entity, and that may be for KYC reasons, maybe be for accredited, et cetera. But the token on chain won't move unless those tag requirements are satisfied. And so we've kind of blended it a little bit there between the legal and the transfer layer, but we're basically trying to give a tool set that people can use as issuers and still be legal and not allow it to trade willy-nilly without.
I wanted to point out something else in terms of Wall Street that I noticed being on Twitter and everything, LinkedIn and everything else in the last few weeks, is there have been so many, again, in my community, especially in the financial advisor, financial analyst community, that they were almost waiting for this big drop in the stock market and to see what would happen with Bitcoin. And when they saw Bitcoin go down too, they could not quickly enough write about how this narrative that those of us who know about it have been trying to spin, which is Bitcoin is the safety asset, right? Bitcoin is where you go to be against the market. That didn't seem to hold, and they all kind of threw that out there really quickly. Of course, you know, in poor taste as the rest of the market's dropping, going to see, you know, Bitcoin's not the safe haven. But now they've kind of lost their steam because, you know, Bitcoin came back, and even more days when the S&P has tanked than Bitcoin has not tanked. So that's something else to point out when you start looking at Wall Street, is there are so many advisors and analysts that don't understand it and don't believe in it, and they are waiting to just be anti anything crypto related, whether it's security tokens that represent real world assets or not. Anything that says crypto or cryptography or blockchain, they're completely against. And that's something that's kind of against those of us that are in the know and frustrated about it.
Yeah, and I think that bridges actually to another point, which is, you know, Wall Street's foray here also includes the fear of becoming the next Polaroid, Circuit City, or Blockbuster. And, you know, these guys are all very smart. Some of them have been my clients over the years in terms of these institutions. And I think they've realized that danger is there. So, you know, they've been active in exploring things. But at the end of the day, even if they adopt the technology, I think they're kind of concerned that they're going to lose some of their income streams. Because, you know, every time something transfers from one place to another, which it does 7 or 8 times before settlement these days, somebody's got a handout taking a little skim, and that can't survive as a survivable business model. So where does that leave you if you're JP Morgan? It's like, okay, you know, we're on the cutting edge, but, you know, now we're in competition with Walmart for remittance, which they are, and you know, we can't keep our profits running, which is a huge deal. Anybody want to comment on that?
I mean,
All right.
I would just say that, you know, this is the changing.
So
go ahead, Adam.
It's interesting you mentioned JP Morgan because someone mentioned them earlier with their coin. Like, and we all know there's a difference between Wall Street being all in or in on blockchain and crypto from an investment standpoint and being in on it from a blockchain efficiency. This can actually help. We can actually utilize the technology regardless of the crypto aspect of it, right? So I think bigger Wall Street companies are starting to see we can utilize the technology and drive some efficiencies the same way we did with the internet 20 years ago. So when the fact that J.P. Morgan on one hand was saying that crypto is bad, and then a few weeks later announced that they're creating their own coin, whether or not they actually launched it is different. But the fact that they actually, that's a possibility, says that they're behind the technology, and they're not dumb, right? They're looking for how they can be more efficient, make their investments go up, get more income, all of those things, and they're not completely dismissing this.
No, but they will have more competition and less rent-seeking opportunities, and so that's a good thing.
Yeah, and I think it points to the larger narrative that they are going to have to shape shift and readjust to this new innovative framework that's out here. If you don't, you'll die. Everything's constantly changing. They're going to have to make that change. I think the question in front of them now is when they find out where they can make these new revenues off of transmissions and settlement charges and things like that in these new areas where they have these exchanges happen. What are they going to do with the wall garden they run into when someone else doesn't want their token or their product? What happens between them and that other person when you finally reach that position through the transaction where somebody maybe doesn't want the JPM Morgan coin? Well, what happens then?
I'm going to say a wave of mergers and acquisition, which I've been waiting on for quite some time, because JP Morgan will then acquire whoever it is who has the token that people want. I'm not kidding at all. That I think
that's
is the
real.
That's going to head.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. The other one that I'm interested in is the various crypto exchanges that now allow you to stake through the exchange, and put aside for a second the issues with Steam and Hive and Justin Sun. But does that look to anybody like depositing your money in a bank to get interest? Because that's what it looks like to me.
Exactly right.
I started looking at that, and I'm kind of like, okay, so these are the new banks that are coming in. This is Netflix to B of A's Blockbuster. Be interesting to see. Hopefully, they're less exploitive than current banks. I don't know.
You make a great point, because if the exchanges,
the problem is, from a theoretical perspective, if they're the new banks and they're going to offer all those services, then everything they do is going to revert back to exactly what banks do.
Yeah, but
they're not
except you have exit
or any different.
Yeah, thank you, Tron. Exactly where I was going to go. You want to explain that real fast?
Yeah, you have the opportunity to just take it back and to take it somewhere else, and that's something that gives you it's a counterbalance to the you got to come to us because we're the only ones that can provide a service. There's Balaji does Severinson, I can never pronounce his name, does an amazing talk on that.
To counter that point, because I think that's an excellent point that Tron's making, is that if exchanges are going to be KYC, AML, CFT, and travel rule compliant, and you're going to see them be able to get the banking level, and this looks a lot like a savings account or even a checking, however you want to expand it to, well, how much longer is it going to be before banks are offering crypto? And Main Street is going to be a lot more comfortable going to those banks buying where they've had an account for 30 years.
And hence the birth of the digital dollar when it really actually happens.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Long live crypto.
Long live crypto. Whatever happens, it will be digital. I mean, that part's gone. I mean, even the government wants to get rid of cash. The government hates cash. I look forward in 15 years to the IRS telling me how much I owe in taxes instead of me filing a return.